Welcome to this educational video about the Bible. My name is Pablo Jiménez, and I am going to be your instructor on this occasion. The Bible is a collection of 66 sacred books. This collection has two main parts. The first part is composed by 39 books and is known as the Old Testament. The New Testament is the second part and is composed by 27 books. Let's talk first about the Old Testament. Both the Christian Church and Judaism recognize the 39 books of the Old Testament as sacred. These books also form the Hebrew Bible. In Judaism, the name of this collection is Tanakh. The word is an acronym for the three parts of the writings: Law, Torah in Hebrew, Prophets, Nevi'im in Hebrew, and Writings, Ketuvim in Hebrews. However, the Christian tradition divides the Old Testament into four main sections: Pentateuch, historical books, poetic books, and prophetic writings. Penta means five in Greek. The Pentateuch includes then 5 books, the 5 books of Moses: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. According to the tradition, Moses is the author of these books. In Hebrew, they are known as Torah, which means law, teaching, and instruction. The historical books tell the history of Israel from the time of the conquest of Canaan until the return from the exile. It includes the following books: Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. The Old Testament contains a whole series of poetic books, also known as the books of wisdom or sapiential books. This collection includes Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. Although classified as prophetic, the Book of Lamentations also has a poetic structure, and some sections of the prophets are also poetic in nature. Regarding the prophetic books, the Old Testament divides them between major prophets and minor prophets. That is not due to their importance but to their length. The major prophets are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, and Daniel. The minor prophets are Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi. Some versions of the Bible, particularly the Roman Catholic ones, include as part of the Old Testament several books that were originally written in Greek. These are Tobias, Judith, 1st and 2nd Maccabees, Baruch, Ecclesiasticus, Wisdom, and some additions to the books of Esther and Daniel. Neither Judaism nor the Protestant tradition recognize these books as inspired. Apocrypha is a Greek word that means hidden. Refers to several books that pretend to be sacred, written by important biblical characters. However, neither the Christian Church nor the Jewish tradition recognize them as such. Some of the apocryphal books of the Old Testament are 1st and 2nd Ezra, also known as 4th Ezra, and the Book of Enoch. Turning our gaze now to the New Testament, this collection of 27 sacred documents derives its name from the Epistle to the Hebrews, which contrasts the New Covenant mediated by the work of Christ with the Old Covenant mediated by the law of Moses. In Greek, this collection is called the New Covenant. However, as the word diatheke in Greek means both covenant and testament, In English, it is called the New Testament. The name comes from the epistle to the Hebrews, particularly Hebrews 9:15, where the word diatheke is used in the phrase hekene diatheke, the new covenant, the New Testament. The church divides the New Testament into 4 sections: Gospel, a historical book, epistles, and the book of Revelation, which is an apocalypse. The Gospels are documents that tells us about the life of Jesus, focusing on his ministry of teaching, preaching, and healing. Only 2, Matthew and Luke, speak about Jesus' childhood. All include the account of the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The 4 Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. However, the first 3 are very similar, so they are also known as the Synoptic Gospels, which means that they can be read together in parallel form. The book of Acts is the only historical book in the New Testament that tells us about the development of the church. It is the second volume, or continuation of the book of Luke. It covers the time from the resurrection of Jesus until the arrival of the Apostle Paul to Rome in the time of Emperor Nero. Public letters or epistles were the most effective means of communication from a distance in the first century of the Christian era. It was the equivalent to Zoom and the internet in our times. These letters were usually written by a secretary or amanuensis, to whom the author dictated what he or she wanted to say. In the same way, letters were read in public aloud, since most people could not read or write. It has to be clear that all the epistles that we find in the New Testament were meant to be read to the congregation. They were public documents, not personal literature. The New Testament contains several collections of epistles or letters. The Pauline epistles are 13, and they are all related to the ministry of the Apostle Paul. The collection includes Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon. 4 of the Pauline letters were written from prison, so they are called the letters from prison or the epistles of captivity, and they are Ephesians, Colossians, Philippians, and Philemon. There are also 3 letters, also part of the Pauline letters, part of the Pauline epistles, that are very similar, and they all talk about the organization of the early church. They are 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus, and they are called the pastoral epistles. The general epistles are letters written by other leaders of the early church, such as the book of Hebrews, which is anonymous, James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, and the book of Jude. These are also known as universal or Catholic epistles. Catholic here doesn't mean Catholic Church, but according to the whole, so representative of the whole church. The Petrine epistles are 1st and 2nd Peter and Jude. Why do we include Jude? Because almost all the content of Jude is repeated on 2nd Peter. The Johannine epistles are those related to the ministry of the Apostle John, specifically 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. The book of Revelation contains visions about the end of the world, about the end of time, that were supernaturally given to John the Seer, who was imprisoned on an island in the middle of the Mediterranean called Patmos. Given that the word apocalypse means revelation in Greek, in some languages, this book is titled Apocalypsis or the Apocalypse. There are hundreds of fragments and even some documents from the New Testament times that claim to be sacred. First, there are Gospels, like those about Jesus' childhood and the Gospel of Peter, among many others. We find several accounts of Acts by John, Peter, Paul, Andrew, Thomas, etc. Epistles, like the one to the Laodiceans, 3 Corinthians, and a false correspondence between Seneca and Paul. And also we find several apocalypses, like the Apocalypse of Peter, Paul, Thomas, and the Sibylline oracles, among many others. The Bible is complete. These documents will never be part of the Bible, and the church does not recognize any of this apocrypha of the New Testament as sacred. Let's talk a little bit about versions and translations of the Bible. Not a single document or original manuscript of the Old or New Testament has survived. We only have copies of copies. In the past 200 years, archaeology has found several ancient biblical manuscripts. This explains why modern versions of the Bible are a little different from translation made centuries ago, since contemporary versions incorporate new advances in the study of the biblical text. The Old Testament was written mostly in Hebrew, although some sections of the book of Daniel were written in Aramaic, a language that is very similar to Hebrew. The New Testament was written in Common Greek, also known as Koine Greek, although the literary style of Luke, Acts, and Hebrews is a little more refined. Therefore, all versions of the Bible available in English are translations of these ancient languages. The Hebrew language uses an alphabet different from ours and is written from right to left. Until today, it is written without vowels. The most used and known version of the Old Testament in Hebrew is known as the Masoretic text. It was edited and disseminated by rabbis dedicated to preserving the tradition, called the Masoretes, during the first 5 centuries of the Christian era. The Masoretes vocalized the Hebrew text in order to make it easier to read. Here you have a cover of the Hebrew Bible, and on top you have the words Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, Law, Prophets, and Writings. This is a picture of Psalm 1 in Hebrew. There is a Greek version of the Old Testament called the Septuagint. It includes the 39 books that appear in the Masoretic text in the Hebrew Bible, plus also the Deuterocanonicals that were written originally in Greek. In English, it's known as the translation of the 70 because according to the tradition, it was translated by 70 sage men. And the abbreviation is LXX, which means 70 in Roman numerals. This translation was published in the 2nd century before Christ. Therefore, when the New Testament speaks of the Holy Scriptures, it refers mainly to this version, since Greek was the main language of the early church. This is a cover, or the cover, of the Septuagint. Although the New Testament is short, because it only has 27 documents, the Greek manuscripts contains thousands of textual variants. Why? It's very simple. These ancient documents were written by hand, copied by hand, which gave occasion for copies to make mistakes whenever they were writing. Therefore, it is important to use an annotated version of the Greek New Testament in order to understand the many differences, the many variants of the text. This is the cover of the Greek-Spanish New Testament, which is very similar to the one in English. This is a picture of the first verses of 1 John in Greek. Canon in Greek means rule, and it refers to the books that the church has understood as sacred. The 39 books of the Old Testament and the 27 of the New Testament. The development and acceptance of the canon was a very long process. Judaism did not set the Old Testament canon until the first century of the Christian era, and the church did not set the New Testament canon until the 3rd century. All versions of the Bible use abbreviations, and they are usually indicated in the table of contents at the very beginning of your Bible. Some books like Job are so short that they are not abbreviated, but usually you can deduce which books are the ones that are referred to. For example, REV usually is Revelation, and EZ is Ezekiel. Abbreviations can be confusing, so please read the table of content. Originally, the books of the Bible were not divided into chapters and verses. In 1226, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen Langton, divided the biblical writings into chapters in order to make it easier to find references. And when the printing press was invented, then those chapters were further divided into verses. Here you find some examples of how to read biblical references. For example, John 3 means the 3rd chapter of the Gospel of John. 3-4 means chapters 3 and 4. 3:16a means the first part of verse 16. 3:16s means 16 and the next, that is 17. And sometimes you can find SS, which would mean 16, 17, and 18. 3.116 means the 3rd chapter of John from the 1st verse to the 16th. 3.16-4.4 means from the 16th verse of the 3rd chapter to the 4th verse of the 4th chapter. When you have a reference that is divided by a comma, like 3.1-8 and 10-16, means verses 1-8 and 10-16 of that chapter. And when you have 3:16 and 7:38, you're referring to 2 different chapters of the same book. It has been my pleasure to guide you on this brief tour of basic concepts related to biblical theology. Blessings.